I'd like to welcome you all here today for our third INCON virtual learning series. MCI are kicking our series off today with a session on transitioning from virtual to hybrid. So I'd like to welcome Gaëlle, John, and Coralie for joining us here today. Coralie is French, John is Irish, and Gaëlle is Swiss. And they all are part of the MCI PCO team in Switzerland, which is a very big team of about 30 people. And each of these very experienced conference organizers have been working for MCI for nearly 10 years. So they have a lot of experience to share with us today. And what we are going to do is we have a session running for 45 minutes. And we will record this session, and then at the end we will have a Q&A, and the Q&A will not be recorded. What I will do for the Q&A is that I will be happy to have questions in the chat, but also we will be leaving it open for people to raise their hand if you feel comfortable speaking to everybody. So I'm going to kick off now to the MCI team, and thank you everybody for muting while they're speaking.
Thank you very much, Angela. So I'm Coralie, and welcome everybody to this session. I'd like to thank INCON for the opportunity to present today about transitioning events from virtual to hybrid. While we go through the content for today, I'd like to ask you, the audience, to introduce yourself in the chat. Please state your name, where you are from, so that we can already get started on the conversation we'll have at the end of the presentation today. We'd like to have about 25 minutes to present, to share our experience of transitioning from virtual to hybrid event. And during the discussion, we'll also would like you to share your experience about hybrid events. We wanted to address a few key points that are relevant, that have been relevant to us. So Gaëlle will start on defining the concept and the strategy around hybrid events. And then we'll have John touching upon finance and budgeting and sponsors engagement in hybrid events. And then I'll come back to talk about the operational implications of organizing hybrid events and what are my tips for project managers. So without any further ado, I will pass the floor to Gaëlle. Over to you.
So welcome everybody. So we're gonna discuss a little bit about developing the event concept and strategy. So next slide, please. So just one sec. At MCI, we have created the DIVE methodology that we call DIVE. This methodology is to help our client define, ideate, visualize, and engage the audience experience. So because with all these changes over the past 2.5 years now, almost, so we transform from physical to virtual, then now we are transforming from virtual to hybrid. So we have created a methodology at MCI to bring our client to a journey of collaborative design thinking, to help them understand their needs and expectations, to guide them through and decide what they want, what they need, how they need it, how they want it. So yeah, next slide, please. So for us, one key point is really to discuss with your client the needs and expectation, because it's key in the transformation to hybrid, because hybrid can mean a lot of things. That can mean, yeah, almost everything. So we really need to drive our client to let us know what they want, what they expect, and especially what they can afford. Next slide, please. Hybrid, what the perfect, sorry, what is the perfect hybrid event for client and audience? Because like I said before, there is a lot of type of hybrid. So we need to really make clear with the client what they want. Is it a live? Is it recorded? A multi-site, face-to-face, virtual audience? What they want to extract from that, like the metrics. Would it be in the room, in a venue, in the office? It is mainly made for home consumption, mobile consumption. So yeah, so we need really to have clear discussion with the client on what they want and what they expect. Next slide, please. So there is a couple of reasons to go back, to go from virtual to hybrid. One key point is, I think it's the people that they want to meet again. Now, most of the world, not all the world, I know from you guys in China, you cannot travel anymore still. So, but the hybrid give you a good balance between those that can travel and those that cannot, to still be able to join the event and gather the knowledge. To network, I think networking, we all know in our field, it's the most important thing. The delegate experience, the content delivery, improve our finances as well. Multi-channel, increase audience, grow of the Congress, because now we want to keep these virtual attendees, but we also want to go back to some sort of normality and face-to-face event. And also the hybrid offers you a 24/7 engagement. You can come back, you can watch later, you can, for a year or even less or more, but yeah. Next slide, please. There is some pros and cons, obviously, on every type of event anyway. On the pros, there is a wider reach of and the new audiences, because like for European Congress, we see with the virtual, there is a lot of Asian and America's attendees that in normal case, in pre-COVID phase, we did not have that attendees. So now we have new audience. The non-stop access, independent of the time zone also, because you can rewatch the recorded session. You can still ask questions through some platform. Meaningful interaction, because we know also on the face-to-face there is more interaction, but if we mix both, it gets a meaningful interaction. On the con side, we see that there is a digital fatigue. Some people are fed up to be only on the screen and they want to meet and see each other. So this hybrid will balance that. On the cons, it could be a higher cost. And also on the exhibition side, the ROI is a bit lower than expected on a face-to-face. So now I'm gonna give the floor to John to go through with you with the finance and budgeting.
Okay, so I get the job of talking about everybody's favorite subject, finance and budgeting, and I'm going to talk in particular about the pricing of the event and how the pricing fits with the strategy for the hybrid event, in line with what Gaëlle was mentioning. So this first slide here is a big picture, broad sweeping generalization, but like all of those things, there's a fair bit of truth in it. And I'm sure that a lot of you have experienced in the past 2 years trying to square this impossible equation. And it's quite simply that for a virtual event, you have your X number of costs for your virtual platform and you're recording your technology and the virtual conferencing. For an old-fashioned face-to-face event like we knew pre-pandemic, you have your face-to-face conferencing costs, your conference venue, your AV, your food and beverages, etc., etc. And then for a hybrid event, no matter what way you design it or you gear it or what combination of hybrid event you go with, you're going to have some of both. And granted, you can scale it up, scale it down, you can reduce, increase the number of tracks, but that is a challenge. You're always going to have some costs of the traditional face-to-face conference and some of the costs of a virtual conference, and that is a challenge. So hybrid events mean costs for both virtual and face-to-face conferencing elements, whereas On the other side of the budget, the income, generally speaking, remains either the same or a bit lower because you have delegates paying, in a lot of cases, a reduced fee for the virtual only access. So this is kind of one of the most obvious challenges of the hybrid model, and one of the key challenges we've had to grapple with in managing our clients over the past year or so of doing hybrid events. And funnily enough, in our experience, this has not always been immediately apparent to the clients. So that's been part of the challenge in the event design process. We've clients who will be very, very enthusiastic that we must have some virtual conferencing, we must be dynamic, we must be innovative, we must have a hybrid conference. But then you have the challenge of explaining to them, okay, well, is the budget going to pay for this? So that's one of the challenges we've been grappling with through the event design process. Next slide when you're ready there, please. So when we move on to talking about pricing and what do you, in particular registration fees, at what level, what's your approach when you're setting your registration fees for the virtual element and for the combined hybrid element? What approach do you take? We have observed a number of different approaches that can be taken or that have been taken over the past year and a half or so. I've used a bit of kind of marketing jargon for pricing strategies on the left-hand side here, kind of use that as a starting point, and then I'll explain a little bit how we kind of see that approach applies in the context of our event. So if you look at something like what they would call discount pricing, there you're kind of looking at a situation that we would have experienced, say, earlier this year with some of the events that quickly needed to flip to fully virtual during the Omicron outbreak, where really what you're trying to do is just get the event converted to virtual and then just ensure sort of credibility, make sure there are, you know, a good cohort of people attend the event and get people participating. So in that sort of situation, it's a discount, it's get people registering, it's ensure high virtual participation numbers when the face-to-face events of the Congress have been cancelled, where you've had to do a sort of a rescue mission and convert to fully virtual essentially. Then when they talk of premium pricing in the context of the challenges we've had, that might mean what you're trying to do is offer the possibility of virtual only participation, but do it in a way that does not discourage people from registering to attend the event face to face, which can be for financial reasons to ensure that, you know, we get a good cohort of face-to-face attendees to ensure we balance the budget paying the higher fee. And it can also be because the client wants to prioritize getting people back together face-to-face networking, also to ensure there's people there for the exhibition, because exhibitors really tend to like face-to-face. A bundle could be where you are again incentivizing the face-to-face participation, but you're offering the service of some virtual conferencing elements, and you're offering in particular the face-to-face delegates the opportunity to consume the content virtually and on demand, and to catch up on sessions where they might not have been able to attend face-to-face parallel sessions. So there you're offering a certain fee for the virtual delegate, but a significant discount for those that come face-to-face with access to the virtual conferencing. And then the last one, when we talk about a sort of a market penetration pricing strategy, that's something we would have seen, which came as a sort of a pleasant surprise on some of the events that flipped to virtual during the pandemic, whereby we saw participants registering to that event virtually that never before would previously have attended the event face-to-face. So particularly from lower income countries, we would have had a number of clients' events where there were countries in Latin America and Africa with high numbers of delegates registering to attend that event virtually that never would have attended face-to-face. So that's having a kind of a discounted fee for the virtual only access to break into those new markets, to engage and to deliver the content to people from those countries. Next slide. Key thing to bear in mind, and it might seem obvious, but hybrid events, after all we've said, can, should, and must remain profitable, I would say. The reasons that our sorts of clients, international associations, particularly medical associations, deliver conferences, yes, it's to deliver their science and to network and to build community, but it's also as a revenue driver for their association. So hybrid absolutely has to remain profitable. We would say that the keys to ensuring that hybrid remains profitable are having a good, sound pricing strategy, like what I mentioned before. So ensuring that when you offer your price for virtual participation, that you're not discouraging people from coming to the event face-to-face. And you've got to be careful of your costs. So cost control can involve careful selection of the platform and AV costs for the virtual element in line with the scale of the event, in line with your projected revenues. You need to be careful in considering how many program tracks, how many parallel tracks that you're going to lay on, and how many of those are going to be broadcast virtually. And you need to take a critical look at all of the nice to do, the non-essential expenditure of the face-to-face component. So printings, printed branding, catering, all of those sorts of things. In the hybrid model, you probably need to take a little more critical look at that. I'll move on to talking about exhibitors and sponsors, just share some reflections that we've had on those. So exhibition, we would generally say that we have observed a strong desire among conference exhibitors to return to primarily face-to-face exhibiting. Virtual exhibiting, particularly over the past 6 to 8 months or so, the feedback we've gotten from exhibitors is that is increasingly unpopular. It does not work to a large extent for them trying to really engage properly with their market face to face. There are significant costs to them in developing sophisticated virtual booths, and what we're hearing is they see limited return in terms of engagement with potential customers. On the plus side, virtual does facilitate the capture of sales leads. So this is one of the more positive byproducts of the pandemic. Companies now expect face-to-face events to include some sort of virtual component through which virtual leads may be captured. The more advanced virtual platforms can provide additional data of interests to sponsors and exhibitors, like attendee profile info, session attendance stats. These are additional benefits of the virtual space, but they do imply a greater investment in platform technology and staff time. Satellite symposia have been somewhat more popular than virtual exhibiting, and we expect the demand for remote speaker participation in particular to remain post-pandemic. The access to recordings of companies' satellite symposia are now expected to a certain extent as a standard of hybrid events. And again, symposia virtual attendance metrics, like what you see on the slide here, are now expected as a standard. Things like attendee leads, profile info of attendees, subject to all of the data protection rules, etc. Virtual attendance stats and session attendee stats. And last thing I'll mention is commercial branding. So when sponsors purchase branding opportunities on an event separate to satellite symposia and exhibition. These have proved reasonably popular, we would say, and remain reasonably popular after the pandemic, or as we emerge from the pandemic. We've new things like clickable hyperlinked banners on virtual platforms, branded push notifications, pop-up skippable video adverts, and branding of the inter-session stinger videos that happen between sessions. And we expect the demand for these to remain post-pandemic. The advantages of them are that it's kind of low production costs versus the type of printed advertising or printed venue branding that we would have seen before. So there's the possibility for us and for the client to make better margins on those for the income side of the event. They're more flexible, you know, if there's errors or mistakes, or we're still in discussion right up until the event over what a visual and ad needs to say. Ads can be finalized quite late and adjusted right before, and sometimes even during the event. The impact of these are measurable, so we can give metrics on the number of clicks on an ad. When you're at a face-to-face event and a company puts their banner up outside the plenary hall, you can't measure how many times somebody has physically looked at that, so that is an advantage. The disadvantage is it's a greater degree of technical complexity, something new that we've had to get used to working with. And we depend very heavily on the platform provider for the implementation of these and their responsiveness when issues arise. I will now hand over to Coralie, I think, to speak about operations.
Thank you very much, John. So now I would like to address some practical tips and tricks about operations and what this means concretely to organize a hybrid events. Before this, I'd like to take a more higher level view of what are we talking about. Is this another transition? So we had to move from face-to-face to virtual and then to hybrid events. And what does it mean for operation? Does that mean that we need to organize 2 events side by side? Does that mean that we need to double the work? That's an open question, and that may sound a little bit overwhelming. And I would like to see this a bit differently as a new level of sophistication, where you try to take the best of the 2 worlds and organizing your hybrid events. And this is the approach I would like to take here. And then if we step back a little bit, so we've, the industry had to organize virtual events for about 2 years, and there are some learnings out of this, and project managers had to develop a certain set of new skills, or probably skills that were existing, but that became more prominently needed. One is agility. We're living in a unpredictable world, or where it's difficult to make prediction, and things are changing rapidly. And having this mental gymnastic of saying, I can change the concept of my event, and from not overnight, but I can pivot from face-to-face to virtual, and then from virtual to hybrid. And this is a skill that is very useful in our current environment. The second one is digital mindset, developing a digital mindset. What it means is not necessarily understanding and knowing a lot of tools, but it's primarily to be curious about what technology has to offer and how we can integrate this into our events, and what are the new opportunities facilitated by the technology we have at hand. So this is what is meant by digital mindset. Another one is creativity. It's true in our jobs, and it's even more true today. Over the past 2 years, we had to find new solutions to new problems. And that helps moving to this third stage, this third phase of where we need to organize hybrid events, where we have to define a concept, and creativity is important here. So these are the top 3 skills that I see are strong learnings from virtual events. The other 2 areas are things to discuss, new ways of working, I would say. So focused program, what it means is that in the past 2 years, we have been open in questioning with our clients regarding the format of the event. Do we really need to have this 2 hours long session? Do you need to ask your keynote speakers to do 120 slides and go through them in 35 minutes? Can you condense your program in such a way where you go straight to the point and then you give time for discussion. And I think that it's been a useful thinking and brainstorming that you can bring to the hybrid events. And another one is video format. It's been there for quite some time, but we've increased the number of video tutorials or giving more importance about video production, because this is a material that we're using a lot in the virtual world and that we are going to use a lot in the hybrid world. So the list could go on, and feel free to add anything you have in mind in the chat. See what are your thoughts about this? What are the key learnings from virtual events? And I will move quickly because we don't have so much time left, about our tips for project managers, very practical tips. I have 4 for today about the operations of virtual event. The first one is around the concept. As Gaëlle mentioned at the very beginning, it's critical to be clear with the concept of a hybrid event. Hybrid event can mean 100 different things, and you have to have this concept clear with your client. And you need to predefine the rules and requirements, and especially for your speakers and presenters. Do you want to ask them to come on site? Do you want to ask them to stay home, for example, and give their presentation virtually? Or do you want to give them this flexibility? And that will have numerous implications on the rest of your operations. So that's an important thing. 2 other aspects is allow breathing room in your program. Don't compact it too much. It was true in the past for face-to-face events, for virtual event as well, and it is even more true for hybrid events. In case there's any technical issue, you need to be able to fix this and also to allow discussion in your program. The last one is avoid unnecessary complications. It's complicated enough to do hybrid events, so things can remain simple and be very successful. I'll move to the tips number 2 about communication. Building a communication strategy around your hybrid event is key. And one of the success we've noticed in the past is that you need to segment your audience. Obviously, you have 2 different offerings, a face-to-face event and a remote participation. And you can expect, if we take the example of a European event, most of your European audience, you will expect this audience to join you on site. So you will have a dedicated message to them. So there's Antonia, Lisa, and Eva Maria. Join them in Europe at your events. And here is the list of the hotels that we have for you, etc. For another audience that is further away, you'll have a different message. You'll tell Tony and Lisa from China, look, we would love to have you at our events in Europe. We know it may be difficult, so this is what we have to offer. We offer you remote participation. So this is something you need to communicate clearly. Also internally, you need to have a communication plan with your teams. Make sure they understand your concept. Make sure they own this concept of events so that it will facilitate many of your operations. There's a lot of experimentation in hybrid events. And if you keep your experiment for yourself, it may not be as successful as you expect. So share with your teams what you're planning to do, what is your objective, and what are your key success factors. And also with your suppliers, build a relationship with them early. Have them understanding your concept. That will facilitate a lot the conversation you may have. And whenever you face challenge, your supplier can be your best friend and help you with achieving your objectives. So communication is key. The third tip is about the way you manage your staff. One thing that we've noticed is that we've spent more time in managing the content, not necessarily linked to the program itself, but it takes a little bit more more time to deal with this. So for example, you'll have to train your speakers to join remotely. You'll have to gather some more information than you would have in a face-to-face event. So plan for more man-hours of content management. And then on-site, it's useful to have two teams, Team A and Team B. Team A to manage the operations on the floor, and Team B to supervise your virtual events. And it's even better if those two teams during the on-site are physically close. So bring your Team B on-site as well. And then run sheets. This is a document where you list the entire rundown order of your event, and that's key. That helps running the operation smoothly. I'll move to tips number 4. I've already touched a little bit on that, so I will let you read the slide. Speakers management, you'll obviously need to train your speakers, so that's something that you had from virtual events. You'll have to train them on how to deliver good presentations, whether they are remotely presenting or in person. And the way you manage your attendees. Again, set the expectations. Tell your attendees what you expect from them from early on and what's on offer, whether they join in person or join virtually. Probably the offer will not be the same. There will be elements that will be at the in-person events, networking events, poster presentations, for example, that they will not have in virtual participation. So you need to set the expectation and to explain clearly what's in there for each type of registration. And you need to find ways of creating engagement for both audiences. One way is, for example, creating an app for Q&A that is shared with both your virtual and face-to-face audiences, and they can have this common platform, this similar platform where they can also engage with the speakers and discuss among themselves. So these are my 4 tips. And now I would like to very quickly go through the banana peels, the challenges. Be aware of certain challenges that we faced, and I think they are still valid. One is limited availability of suppliers due to high demand. Many events have been postponed and still are being postponed to 22 or 23. And this creates a compression of the market where there's a high demand and probably less suppliers than there used to be prior to the pandemic. So what it means in terms of operation is that you may have a different timeline to work on with your suppliers. So be aware of this. The second aspect, and is related to the first one, is that the meeting industry has not fully recovered from the pandemic. So some hotels, for example, have not completely opened, so the service may be limited. So this is a way to set your expectations. Check first what's available. We know some restaurants have issues finding staff, or the airlines have changed a little bit. So we are operating an event in a different environment somehow. Then I'll jump to another kind of challenge or question that you have to address to your client. What kind of flexibility you want to give to your participants and your sponsors? If I register in person today, can I switch to virtual attendance as is, or is there any penalty that you want to apply in order to incentivize your participants to commit to join on-site or virtually from an early phase? So this is an open question. Another one is that participants will tend to register much later than they used to do. This was a trend that was true before the pandemic, and it's even more true today. People register later and later. The decision-making cycle is shorter, and you need to understand that and to take this into account. It makes not the life easier when you want to budget, but this is something to take into account. in terms of prediction as well, it may be still difficult to make prediction regarding the ratio of face-to-face and virtual attendance. So that will have a direct impact on the size of the room you will want, the order in catering you will place. But this is something today that we have to take into account. And probably in a year from now, we'll have more solid prediction model. But here we're still in a phase of experimentation, I have to say, and it may be difficult to predict. And I will finish my presentation with the last item, the last challenge, the health and safety protocols. We're not completely out of the pandemic now, and there may still be health and safety restrictions and protocol to put in place in your event. So start at an early stage to plan on these protocols and what you will ask to your delegates: vaccination, masking, etc. And this is something you need to keep in view. And with this, I will thank you very much for your attention.